Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. I'm your host Sean Hussey, joined alongside me by my brother Daniel. Daniel, how are you getting on?
Not too bad, Sean. How's things?
Yeah, another busy weekend of sport. Probably a little bit more variety to it than we've had in recent weeks with the Euros, but there's a lot of GA action. Dan, what games did you get to watch?
Yeah, well, obviously, I'd say myself, yourself, like half the country kind of struggled to watch sport on, considering the weather we had. But I did manage to sit down and watch the Monaghan versus Armagh game. I think by that time of the day, I was sick of the sun. So while I saw none of Clare Wexford in the hurling, I got the Monaghan Armagh game, and Jesus, we'll talk about that game in detail. But honestly, it's probably one of the best games I've ever watched live, to be fair. And then I watched the Dublin Kilkenny hurling final, which was obviously disappointing from a Dublin perspective. And then on to Sunday with the Open, like I had in the background Donegal Tyrone, but I'd say I caught more Limerick Tipperary, and Jesus, yeah, the Open kind of took centre stage there with Morikawa against Spieth. But I'd say nearly the most enjoyment I got out of watching sport was at about 1:30 there on Monday morning when I decided to stay up and watch Seamus Power and do a bit of tweeting on it as well. And he was brilliant because it was such a massive win for him, obviously, as well. So yeah, I think GA golf for me were the two, and I couldn't really fit anything in, to be honest with you. I know you were kind of a lot of, was it the cricket finals and stuff you had on in there? You know, there was a big occasion there, so you kind of obviously struggled yourself to get a bit of sport in.
Yeah, I watched the hurlers on Saturday night, the Dublin game, and to be honest, I didn't think it was a great game. I
No.
think Kenny ultimately had just probably a little bit too much for Dublin, and a few COVID issues, and obviously the injury to Owen O'Donnell was massive. So it'd be interesting to see what happens to them in 2 weeks' time in the qualifiers. But God, I mean, it was a classic kind of summer sport day, and when you look at some of the games, and you're trying to keep an eye on a lot of things, and I suppose a lot of people have a big issue at the moment of not being able to go to these games, and a lot of the times not being able to watch the game, whether it be on Sky or whether it be on the GA Go or different things. So it's a bit of an interesting one. But if we take that Monaghan Armagh game, and obviously what's happened up in Monaghan to that young guy, the under-20 captain O'Duffy. I mean, it was such an unbelievable performance from them to kind of keep going. And I'm not sure if you heard Banty's post-match interview after the game, but I kind of just showed you how big GA can be.
Yeah, and Jesus, when I saw it was going ahead, like, and I always be careful not to, I didn't, obviously condolences to the family, and that's the most important thing. But I didn't want to, without knowing the facts, like it's very tough. You don't know whether the family would requested the game to go ahead, or obviously not. But you know what I mean, or the Monaghan player. So you always got to be a bit careful about what you say about these things. But Jesus, it was an absolutely incredible performance and an absolutely incredible atmosphere. And I did find Armagh's defense to be so naive; it was ridiculous. Like, and while they went out and played football the right way, I thought they were pound for pound they were a far better team than Monaghan, but they didn't manage to show because they conceded stupid goals at stupid times. And it wasn't even like Monaghan did anything outrageously. It was just one-on-one. They beat a man, or Monaghan would get a ball into the full forward line, into Jack McCarron or something, and there'd be a runner off the shoulder, and someone wasn't tracking their man, and that's it. It's a goal. And to concede 4 goals, to be 7 points down in the final water break, and they went to Jim McGuinness on Sky Sports, and he goes, "This game isn't over yet." And Rian O'Neill catches a kick out from that water break, puts it in, goal, back to 4 points. And Armagh almost completed the comeback too early. And with 5 minutes to go, they're a point up from memory. And I remember thinking, Jesus, they need to just keep, and it's the hardest thing in sport, they need to keep pretending they're losing this game here. And they didn't. They retreated. Monaghan would beg in, and Conor McManus, they got a couple of handy frees. But yeah, like it was obviously brilliant and emotional day for Monaghan. And Banty's interview was absolutely incredible, and that's the most important thing. And I also thought Kieran McGeeney spoke very well after the game as well. From a purely football perspective, Armagh would definitely have regrets about this season because there was an Ulster title there for them. I do genuinely think they would have given Tyrone a right game in the final, and the fact that they're not there, again, I think Donegal were probably a better team than Tyrone, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think there's huge frustration that Armagh haven't got it done this year because they managed to stay in Division 1. And this was such a good opportunity, and they just leak goals. And whether that's, that bit of experience in an Ulster game, maybe. But I definitely think they should give Kieran McGeeney the year, like the likes of Kieran Donaghy. They have a lot of Kierans on the backroom staff. There's huge potential in that Armagh team. Like Rian O'Neill is, in my opinion, the best young footballer in the country. If you put David Clifford in the footballer of the year category. I definitely think Rian O'Neill, he's been absolutely incredible. The O'Neill brothers as well, Oisin too. It's such a talented team without Jamie Clark as well, you forget. So I don't know whether he'll be tempted looking at that, thinking I could have been involved there, I could have been the difference, who knows. But Armagh will have huge regrets about this season, because that was a game that if they played it again, I definitely think Armagh would approach it slightly differently, maybe a little bit more defensive, or just I don't know, track the runners. It would just seem that there's just something wasn't quite right in that defense, and it's a frustration that they'll regret it. But fair play to Bandy, fair play to Monaghan. They managed to see it out, and when they lost the game, they managed to win it back almost, which was incredible. But the high scoring game, Jesus, it was absolutely nuts. Probably the highest scoring, probably the best Ulster game played in the last few years. It kind of reminded a lot of people about the 90s games like Derry and Down and stuff like that. So it was a great occasion, great atmosphere in the ground as well. And yeah, it should be a good Ulster final now. And geez, Monaghan could definitely fancy their chances of winning as well.
Yeah, and I think that game is set to be moved to Croke Park. I think they're going to try and increase the attendance, and I think the same is going to be for the Connacht final.
But the Galway Mayo is Sunday 1:30, and then I think the Ulster final is the Saturday 4:00, and then the Leinster final will be the following day, which I think it's probably a good decision if you can get 18,000 down there. Obviously in the middle of the pandemic, to be traveling down to Dublin, the optics aren't great for that, but here we are, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's one to be kept an eye on. Just on Tyrone and Donegal, I mean, it seems like every year either Donegal or Tyrone, whoever comes out of Ulster is almost the third or fourth best team in Ireland. But I mean, Donegal really haven't done in the last while, and again, disappointment on the weekend.
Yeah, again, I think maybe looking at this too simplistically, but I definitely think Armagh were better than Monaghan, and I definitely think Donegal were better than Tyrone before the sending off. Like, if Michael Murphy scores that penalty, they're 5 clear. And while I don't think Donegal have been firing on all cylinders, I did think they had enough to beat Tyrone. Now, albeit Tyrone were very impressive the way they beat the 14 men, but yeah, the game turned on. Well, initially it turned on the penalty because Donegal were 2 up. Again, I was watching the background, saw Michael Murphy was stepping up, and I go, right, this is 5 points. That's game over. Even modern day Ulster football, this scoring bonanza, 5-point lead, you definitely think Donegal see it out with 15 men. They didn't. The yellow, the first yellow is probably a tad harsh. It's definitely not a black. The second black, whether it's a yellow or not, I don't know. I don't know. I think there's a real right. And again, the commentary on these decisions makes no reference to the rules half the time. But so long as you've made it's an accidental foul, you can't get booked, or you can't get a black card, you can't get a yellow card, you can't get a caution. Basically, it's distinct part of the rules that say accidental means that you can get the definition, like pull down opponent has to be deliberate. You know what I mean? It can't be accidental. He's gone for the ball. He's kind of half taking his foot away. It's a bit of a soccer kind of foul, really, in soccer yellow. To be given a black card is just a wrong decision. Whether it's a yellow, I don't think it is. I think there should be a bit more leniency there. And Jesus, yeah, it was tough scenes to watch him. A bit kind of like, you forget these lads are humans as well until he sits down on the bench, and he was very distraught. It was a bit kind of emotional watching him, going, Jesus, that's Donegal season over, because all of a sudden you look at them and go, you forget it's knockout almost watching the game, don't you? And then you realise, at least they'll have a run in the qualifiers. No, that's it, they're out. And while I don't like people having a pop at referees for various reasons, I do think that was the wrong decision to send them off, and it cost Donegal the game probably. Obviously, he shouldn't have missed the penalty, but yeah, whether he was fit or he's been struggling with injury this year. It's just been a disaster of a season, really, for Donegal. They were lucky to get over the line against Derry, who I definitely think will give it another crack next year. In fact, I think Derry and Armagh are the 2 teams to watch next year in Ireland, let alone Ulster. But for me, it was frustrating to watch it from a Donegal perspective anyway.
Derry minors beat Kerry there the other day, so there's obviously a lot of work being done in Derry GA circles. I suppose we'll quickly touch on the Dublin Meath game and the other Leinster semi-final. I think it was probably a little bit better weekend for provincial football than it has been the last couple of weekends. I think it was a slightly better weekend, even just taking the scores wise. But that's a conversation that we're not going to have now about what we think about it. We've had it before, but Just on the Dublin game, did you see anything from it, or indeed anything from some of the media reporting? Pat Spillane's been quoted as saying a lot of things. Joe Brolly as well. Do you think there is that little bit of a chink in Dublin's armour? I mean, there's a lot of people who've come out in Dublin's defence. A couple of their past players, Bernard Brogan, Paul Flynn. What's your take on it?
Yeah, well, I'll qualify everything I say here by saying I did only catch the highlights of the game, and it was the same with the Wexford game. I didn't watch it live, but caught the highlights. Like, it wasn't just the golf, like the hurling was on, like the clash with the Munster hurling. It was right there for me to go out of my way to spend £8 on a game I'm not even going to watch, not to justify my non-watching of Dublin. But yeah, the Wexford game, the handicap was 23. And like Dublin, it's a good barometer to talk about the handicap, because Dublin have cleared it, particularly in the last 3 years. I think it's something like 9 of their last 10 games going into this year, or something outrageous like that. And the Wexford game, I couldn't believe the score coming from Wexford Park at all. Like, Division 4 team, like the quotes from the Wexford manager before the game, like, we're gonna, like, it was just, they'd already accepted defeat, and for them to get so close to Dublin, it wasn't a case that Wexford were a dairy waiting in the long grass that you thought were impressive. And then it seemed that normality resumed. Again, I was doing this just watching the score on Twitter, and when Dublin were so far ahead at half time, I was like, geez, how do we ever doubt them? And the second half performance, from what I saw, was absolutely atrocious. And I will also say that Meath should have had a penalty 3-2 down in the first half. A stonewall penalty when Brian Fenton, basically, all over the Meath attacker, and Dublin got literally a penalty for the same foul a few minutes later. So Meath fans are rightly to be frustrated. They're also right to be frustrated that Collin Morikawa, Meath man, didn't bring it up on the Sunday game, but that's another story. But like, there you are, Sean. Like, that's the sort of messing going on there. I don't know where his allegiances really lie at the end of the day. But Meath will be frustrated. In terms of your original question about whether there's a chink in Dublin's armour, like, there has to be, based on these performances. Like, again, it's not a case that Dublin were unbelievable in that first half. It's that decision went for them. There was a 6-point swing. Meath probably dropped the heads, went in at halftime so far down, and then to let this doesn't. I think Dublin's such high standards and the ruthlessness they beat these teams is the reason you should be worried. And to be fair, I think a lot of, from what I've seen, people are worried. It's not just outside Dublin. It feels like inside Dublin that people are worried. And the Stephen Cluxton situation isn't good, whatever's going on there. The fact he hasn't retired one way or the other, the fact he hasn't announced that he won't be there for the rest of the season. And again, he's fully entitled not to be, but it's the fact that there hasn't been any communication between him and Desi Farrell. It suggests that something's not quite right in the camp for whatever reason, and it's kind of mind-boggling the way this has happened, and it's all unfolded almost away from the TV cameras. Like, the fact these games are on GA Go means a lot of people haven't watched them. The fact they've been clashing with, again, Munster final, not even Munster hurling final, is the reason people haven't watched this. So I guess the first time we'll have a proper look at Dublin for most of the country will be against Kildare, who kind of limped over the line against Offaly. It was a good game against Westmeath. It was an entertaining highlights, but another kind of performance, you kind of go, 214-18. The Westmeath scored 2 more than them scores wise. So I expect them to come through that by, the 7, 8, 9, 10 points. Well, yeah, you would be concerned. Like, and it wasn't the case that if Kerry got to the final last year, they would have beaten Dublin. Like, maybe, I don't know. I do expect Dublin to have enough, too strong for Kildare, too strong for the Connacht champions, either Galway or Mayo. But right now, you'd look at Kerry and Dublin and say there's only one winner at the moment. So I don't know what you think in the matter, or what you caught the highlights at all the Sunday game, or.
Yeah, I think it is very hard to judge until both teams have come up against a high quality outfit. So I think until you see that, and the problem is this year with so few games and with everything, we're not going to see a whole heap of games. It's not like the Super 8 where Kerry played Mayo that time down in Killarney, and you just got a glimpse then of what could happen come All Ireland final day. So it does feel like you're priming yourself for 1 or 2 games if you're Dublin and Kerry, and indeed Mayo. I mean, that's just Mayo a little bit less maybe with the Connacht final or coming up against a Galway or someone. So there is that little bit of, they're just jostling for position like a Formula 1 race, unlike the one at the weekend. But it is quite interesting to see the two and how the narratives are. I do think we've got 2 teams definitely on different trajectories, and I think what happened with Dublin post, to be honest, I think it's all happened relatively quick, and I think it's post the training. in lockdown. I think a lot of that has backfired for Dublin, and then a lot of people have kind of stepped away, and there was the thing last year with Paul Mannion, and so there's different things that's affected the Dublin camp that never really appeared to happen under Jim Gavin. I mean, guys like Jack McCaffrey or Mannion himself would walk away for a few years and they'd come back and everything was rosy. So definitely feels like it's different for Dublin at the minute. And I don't think their squad is where it was 5 or 6 years ago, where you say you can let two or three players go. You could let a Jack McCaffrey go now. I think if someone, for example, like a Brian Fenton, or for whatever reason said, look, I'm going to enjoy my summer now, or I'm not sure it would be allowed. I think Dublin are in a less strong position when they were a couple of years ago, where they could afford to maybe have a few players go away, because they had the likes of, Brogan and McManaman and Keane O'Sullivan all around the panel who were obviously good enough. And the one thing I would have a problem with is, over the last 2 years, certainly maybe since Desi Farrell, I don't think Dublin have managed the development of some of their players well. I mean, I think it's bizarre how you've got people like the Pasquale brothers, who in any other county in Ireland they'd be starting, and certainly even if you look at Kerry. So it is a weird one. With Dublin.
Tough. I know just on Pasquale, because I didn't think he played great. What game did I watch him in? Was it the Wexford game or whatever game he played? I was like, I'm not 100% sure in the inter-county level, but I guess you might have a point there in the sense that maybe he should have been brought in a lot more during the league campaign, 17, 18, 19, and maybe there hasn't been a lot. And a lot of Dublin fans have been pointing this out when the money debate comes up, that their record at underage isn't amazing. Yeah. And when you do punch the numbers, particularly at minor level, it hasn't been what you'd expect. So maybe the other counties are catching up a small bit, or...
Well, what I think it is, a lot of people do say that it's the bulk of the sort of the last 6 in a row winning team, Kilkenny, Eric Lowndes, guys like that, all came from the one age group, Jack McCaffrey, which I think was the 2013
under Jim Gavin.
Under Jim Gavin, with the under 20s and the minors, and they're kind of the one age group. So it is almost a lot of people like to say it's a bit of a golden generation now. You still have to piece it all together. And then you couple that and you're watching the hurling on Saturday, going, geez, Dublin are probably missing a couple of players here in the hurling. Certainly what happened with COVID, and you're going, if only a couple of them footballers played hurling, we'd be in business. I'm not sure if you caught any of it, Dan, or did you watch the Limerick tip game, which I agree with you on that on Sunday afternoon. That's the All Ireland hurling final, basically. That's the two best teams in the country, and other games are going up against it. I'm not sure what you made of it.
Yeah, just on last thing on the footballers, like we are talking about them like as if they've lost the All Ireland. Yeah, it's almost got me a little bit more. I know I've spoken on this podcast and other podcasts about falling out of love with the Dubs a small bit in terms of the success. I'd say by the time if we do get to a final against Kerry, and the Kerry fans and Kerry are going in as favourites, I think I might, really grasp that love and really want to win, albeit a 7th in a row now. The game needs Kerry to win, but maybe Dublin could be the underdogs this year. In terms of the hurlers, before we move on to the Munster game, to be fair, if you take 4 players out of any squad, they're going to, if you take Kyle Hayes out of Limerick, straight away you've got a weaker team. I know Limerick are the best squad in the country, and just, so for Dublin, I'd say that in just in terms of preparation, to have a couple of those players not playing definitely didn't help things. But yeah, you could see, and I've been saying it for ages, like one of the best hurdlers in the country, albeit a club hurdler, is Conor Callan, and he's playing for the Dublin footballers and will be for the foreseeable anyway. So that you're never going to have your best team out there. In terms of the Limerick Tipperary game, Jesus, again, I had it on in the background, but I don't think I've ever quite seen something where Limerick are 11 points down at one stage. Gallant should have got a red card. To be fair, I know he's almost like he was in disbelief of what he just seen, and maybe just thought it was more of a rough play as opposed to a red card. But then they somehow managed to come back, and Liam Sheedy will be absolutely livid, because it's not that they didn't play well and they were just beaten by the better team. It's as if they brought their A game, they got it right. And then at halftime, they just, I don't know, it seemed like, and a lot of people have been saying this now, that it's, when you're playing Limerick, it's like playing the Dubs now, or at least the Dubs a couple of years ago. It's like you need to have plan A, that works, but you also need to get on to plan B before plan A doesn't work, if that makes sense. And Tip were just in shock, and then before you know it, the game was over at the water break. So, I know everyone always talks about when you're watching hurling, oh, Jesus, hurling in 2 minutes could change. Well, rarely really you see a comeback of that magnitude in hurling, at least in recent years. I know there's been a couple. I know the All-Ireland semi-final last year between Kilkenny and Waterford definitely rings a bell, but geez, it was amazing. And Limerick they're just a well-oiled machine. They're just ruthless. It seems like the lads are so well built, and they seem to have such a head start. It seems like they got such a head start on the S&C like 10 years ago when they were doing it, to the point now where it just seems to just kicking on ahead of these teams. And it seems like men versus boys in that second half against Tipperary, who, like you said, Galway aside, and considering Galway were poor against Dublin, Kilkenny aside, maybe Tipperary are the second best team in the country. I actually wouldn't rule out Tipperary giving Limerick a right go if they got back to an All-Ireland final. But the question for Tipperary, similar to the question for Kerry and Mayo in recent years when they came up against Dublin, is can they get to that All-Ireland final to even get the chance to play? Because Kerry last year, in my opinion, were the second best team in the country. Didn't even make it to the All-Ireland final to get that crack against the Dubs. Will Tipperary get back to play Limerick again in the All-Ireland final? Who knows? I think that would be an absolutely unbelievable. But again, Tipperary are going to have to beat, who are they going to have to beat? Cork, Clare, Galway, Waterford, or in a quarter-final, and then to play Kilkenny in a semi-final, to then play Limerick in the final. The hurling championship is shaped up very nicely, but again, whoever gets to the final against Limerick, Limerick will have to get through their semi-final, is going to be heavy underdogs. But Liam Sheedy, again, maybe it's the Liam Sheedy factor, but I wouldn't rule out Tip against, put it this way, if Tipperary were a backable price on All-Ireland final day, I'd probably give them a crack and watch them, because they'll have something. Yeah. They'll learn a lot from that defeat, a lot more than Limerick will learn about the victory, I think, which maybe that doesn't count for much. But in my opinion, Liam Sheedy's a clever guy. I think Tipperary will come with a couple more plans. But again, will they get there, Sean? I'm not 100% sure they will.
The one thing I would say is they've got that thing where Kilkenny are going to have probably a weekend off, and there's always that debate: do you want to be playing more games or less games when you come into a last round of the qualifier into the semi-final? Our team's going to be cold. But when you mentioned the Tipperary lead, I thought it was funny, having listened to it a little bit and read a little bit. I mean, the amount of people, they say it in football that the worst lead in football is in soccer is a 2-goal lead, and what people are saying the worst lead in hurling is a 10-point lead. I mean, you're getting all this, getting into all this position. So I just thought it was an interesting debate. But definitely, I mean, if you look at some of the Limerick team, I mean, they really do look like, and it's been said before, that they could really dominate for a number of years. Everything is in place, put it that way. The structures are in place, the players are there, and just you even see how clever John Kiley is, and the evolution, I suppose, of a player you mentioned earlier, Kyle Hayes, from centre forward, from winning Young Hurler of the Year at centre forward, and he's kind of dropped them further out the pitch, and he's just diversified his role so much, yet hasn't weakened his influence or hasn't weakened Limerick's overall play. So I know there's Paul Connacht's in with John Kiley, and there's a lot of work in the background, but it just shows you that probably the two, certainly the last 5 years, the two most well set up teams in terms of coaching and style in Gaelic games has been Dublin and Limerick in the hurling. So it's definitely something that if you can get your coaching right, it's invaluable.
And they all seem like they're household names already, so young. You know what I mean? Similar to the Dubs, like Kyle Hayes, Aaron Gallan, Cian Lynch, Gerard Hegarty. You know what I mean? Like those four, like, and Aaron Gallan didn't start, albeit came on early enough. They're just so. It's that crop of player. It might be the Dublin 2013 or 2011 team, the under 20 team in 2013, maybe the same as this Limerick group of players. It might be their golden generation, but again, the kids in Limerick are looking at this. The structures are there. JP McManus has put a lot of money in there. And it does seem, like you meant, like Tipperary, I think, are well coached. It just seems Tipperary brought back Liam Sheedy maybe a couple of years too late, and they're playing catch up again, trying to catch up with Limerick. But that Limerick team, and like you said, last thing on John Kiley, I completely agree with you. I think he's got a bit about him, like he's the management. He's at times a bit of a Jim Gavin vibe off him, in the sense he knows exactly what's going on. But Jesus, 11 points comeback. Like, when I was watching the game, like, there's no way you come back from 11 points, and they just did it so convincingly, which is the worrying thing, like I said, for Tipperary. But yeah, it'll be interesting how the hurling championship plays out. I definitely think with the qualifiers in hurling, there's a lot more storylines to the hurling championship, where the football, like, again, Michael Murphy's sitting on the bench, that costing him the Donegal, the championship, and me going, that's not right. Like, do you know what I mean? That's they've had one or two games. The football structure, we're not going to get on about that, but the COVID structures, the hurling has definitely done better than the football. I'm sure the footballs are going to be nearly over in a couple of weeks. It's going to be 4 teams left, where hurling's got, the next 3 or 4 weeks are really going to be incredible games. And like, I just on the Clare Wexford, I only caught the highlights of that game, so I didn't watch it or anything. But Clare going about their business. Like, I don't think that's a bad Wexford team at all. They put it up to Kilkenny and they got off to that bad start and nearly kind of caught Clare. But Clare gave Tipperary a good game. Like, there's just, Cork gave Limerick a good game for the first half. There's whoever comes out of that qualifying will give whoever the beaten provincial finalists a good game anyway.
Yeah, well, I do think it almost feels like the GA Championship season has started this weekend, and it's going to be here for the next few weeks, and it's good to see, obviously, people getting back into grounds. We're going to move on to the golf quickly. Last thing we're going to cover. And I mean, this guy, Collin Morikawa, he's just, when you look at his golf swing and you look at how he behaves and how he acts and the mannerisms, the kind of the Tiger Woods nature, if you like. But I mean, this guy could dominate. I mean, and we've said it about a few golfers now, but there just seems to be 2 majors in 8 start. He's won his debut at the PGA. He's won his debut at the Open. He just cleans up. He's won WGCs. He's won regular events. He's just an unbelievable player. I think he's second for the cut record behind Tiger for his most cuts made since turning pro or since his debut. I mean, Dan, this guy could do it all. Yeah,
talk about being so obvious in hindsight, Jesus, like, and I know I live with Shane here, who's been going on about Morikawa for the Open for weeks. So watching him on the Sunday on the screen, like, it was so obvious. Like, Masters this year, major records. Since winning the PGA last year, he missed the cut in the US Open, but following that, the Masters this year tied 18th, PGA tied 8th, US Open tied 4th. On golf courses that don't necessarily suit Collin Morikawa, particularly the US Open. I don't think even the Masters overly suits him. But anyway, he just talked about trending upwards to win a major then. And it was just the way he went about it. He's like the best iron player in the world, really. And the fact that the course isn't necessarily a bomber, like, look at Bryson, barely made the cut, albeit he had a good Sunday. It was just the writing was on the wall. But for him to win 2 majors in 8 starts, like, he's got such a head start really on other players. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't win 2 majors in your first 8 starts, so you can go the next 5 years not winning a major and still be on track. Do you know what I mean? That's a scary thing. So, and he does seem that he has everything in place to go ahead and win multiple majors. And like you said, Sean, we always get carried away. I know I always get carried away about probably every major winner in the last 10 years, but this guy's 24. Like, he's like, I just can't see how he doesn't win more majors than, for example, Rory McIlroy. Do you know what I mean? And I do think, do you want to come in on that? Sorry.
I was just going to say, well, because I was thinking about it in the car earlier, I said, well, what's success now for Collin Morikawa when he gets to 30? I mean, I was thinking, certainly he's got the ability to, and having won 2 difficult ones already, he's got the potential to do the Grand Slam. But I was thinking in my head, if he wins less than 4, or if he's not the most prolific major winner of his generation, and then you take his kind of age group of 3 or 4 years, the same way Rory is probably the most gifted of his, and you've got further gone back and you've got other players. But I mean, if Morikawa, would you agree with, if Morikawa wins less than 4 majors, then he has underachieved in his next 10 years?
Yeah, probably. But I'll qualify everything we say about Collin Morikawa now, that you do forget how incredibly hard it is to win majors. Like, when Rory McIlroy won his 4th in 2014, do you honestly think the next 28 majors he wouldn't win a major? Like, you'd be out the door. Like, you honestly, if we had this podcast back then and you said that to me, I'd be like, you've actually lost the plot. And it would have taken the 7 years for me to be convinced. But sure, by then, do you know what I mean? I've already made my mind up. Like, it is so hard to win majors. Though, even with Brooks, when he won his 4th, and he's contended in majors, but, like, he still hasn't won one in the last few starts. I know injuries come in there, but you just don't know. And I always remember what Padraig Harrington said about, like, they're like, why haven't you won more majors, Padraig? Do you have any regrets after the 3rd major or whatever? And he said he had this theory that every golfer hits their hot streak for 18 months, 2-year period. Yeah. He got lucky that whatever the things were in place. Tiger Woods was injured for those 3 majors, that he managed to capitalize and take full advantage of them. Now, and I think at the time he was answering a question about Tommy Fleetwood, saying this hot streak will and he wasn't having a personal attack on Tommy Fleetwood or anything. But I do always think that Tommy Fleetwood hasn't quite hit those heights again. Would he ever do it? Did Rory McIlroy hit his peak in 2011 to 14? Like, we're talking like minuscule of percentage here. So, like the old line would probably be 4 or 5 majors for Morikawa, and I think he will probably get there, because just with him it does seem a bit different, because like that, the way he hits his iron shots, he'll be able to do that when he's 50. Like that swing, do you know what I mean? He's not relying on bombing it. He's not relying on like his slow takeaway. So there's no space there really to get injured, is there? It just seems that he has everything in place. But no, it's amazing. We always get carried away. There won't be a major for 9 months. Yeah. So Morikawa's kind of got lucky in his hot streak, which was just over a year, isn't it? That they managed to have 6 majors. He's won 2 of them. You know, if he plays really good golf for the next 9 months, he's not going to win a major, obviously. And then it's going to come around to the Masters. You know, he's more likely than unlikely not to win the next 4 majors. Do you know what I mean? In terms of odds. So then there's, you know, suddenly you haven't won a major in a year, even though you haven't done a lot wrong. You know, someone, you know, realistically, all of a sudden it's 2 or 3 years you haven't won a major. So it is always, you got to remember like the competitiveness in golf. Like, look at that leaderboard. Jordan Spieth was second. He's playing phenomenal golf now. John Rahm, his 4 majors this year have been incredible. I think he's been the best major player of the year, if that makes sense. So it's just, golf is so competitive right now. Brooks Koepka, there's just so many golfers there that you've always got to be careful that Morikawa's hit his hot streak in this period and managed to win 2 majors. Like, on another day, who knows? Like, Jordan Spieth, I would have been interested if Jordan didn't mess up on Saturday and was playing in the final group with Collin. And I think that would have helped him in this front 9, because he made, or at least his front 6 or 7 holes, because he made a right mess of it on Sunday. Like, at one stage, Brooks was 1 shot ahead of him. Do you know what I mean? And Jordan responded well, but that putt on 18 he missed, and he also bogeyed 17 on Saturday. I think that will haunt him for a while, because I know Collin played phenomenal golf, and I think he always would have won it, but it would have been a proper shootout, and I think that would have helped speed on the Sunday. But Jordan will have plenty more opportunities. He's got his 3 majors. Collin, yeah, you've got to be excited about him. But again, it's such a long stretch now. So what we're not even at August yet. We're at July. Next major's at April. Who knows who's going to be playing well? Like, again, going into this event, it was all about John Rahm. No one was talking about Collin Morikawa, you know. So again, I'm always going to try, and I know we've got a few comments in here. One of them was like, no one will dominate Jeremy McCabe here, dominate golf the next 5 to 10 years. Too many good players. DJ, Rahm, Morikawa. Like, DJ, yeah, what's happened to him? You know, and he had a low-key tied 8, I think, this week. So he'll definitely come back to form, because I think there's some sort of swing issue there he'll sort out. So I don't know, Sean. It's just, we get carried away a lot. I think golf is in as good a place as it's ever been. And I know, again, people have said that a lot, but it is genuinely, the big names are turning up. Even look at Louis. He's a big name turning up at every single major this year. So I think we're gone past the days of Lucas Glover winning majors in 2012 US Open, wasn't it? And those kind of winners, I think that's hopefully gone. Although, like, look at Phil, no one thought Phil could win. Which is, again,
the thing is with that, having looked at Morikawa, I agree with that. I mean, you look at some of the players. I just think with Morikawa, I think he's elevating himself in the last at that age to do it. And even if you hear his temperament, the way he speaks, where he's won around the world, I think everything's in place for him. What I would say is, my God, it set us up for some of the singles at the Ryder Cup now will be electric. I mean, you look at Team Europe, they're in a pretty decent place. Obviously, Rory's going to have a big end to the season with the Olympics, and then the Ryder Cup, the end of season for the FedEx Cup. You've got maybe Shane, he's just entered the automatic qualification points for the first time in a while. You've got people like Lee Westwood, Collin Morikawa is absolutely flying. Brooks Koepka, Bryson, DJ, JT. I mean, some of the players that are going to miss that American Ryder Cup team are going to be off the charts. People like Scotty Scheffler, who's been one of the best players in the world without winning. Tony Finau
at the moment, I think.
Yeah, so it's going to be it's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, something we'll discuss later on.
Yeah, just on this question, Sean, who will win more majors, John Rahm or Collin Morikawa? And interesting, you were talking about John Rahm before he won his major, and I agreed. I think you just don't know when you're going to win your first major. The fact he won. Now, again, this hot streak come April, like Dermot's been saying in the comments here, things will look different. Like, to me, I think Collin. But like, I think him having the 2-1 lead is massive, because If it was the other way around, I'd probably go with John. I know that's a cop out a bit, but the fact he's 2-1 up already.
What I would say with John Rahm's got some of the best scoring power in the world. I mean, when he goes hot, very few people can catch him. So I did say that. I definitely thought winning your first major for a player like that is so hard. Once you win that, it's like your first win with Tony Finau. It's just getting over the line. Hopefully, we might see the same with Seamus Power. You win one, you just start feeling it. You're exempt. Everything's just a little bit more easier. You've seen it with Richard Bland this year. I think Collin will probably win more, but I think John Rahm in every major he goes into will be favourite for the next few years because of his scoring power. And I think Augusta he'll be favourite. He'll be up there competing. But I do think John Rahm, if there was anyone I'd want 4 or 5 shots back at the leader to make a charge, it'd be at the moment certainly it'll be John Rahm. But I do think if you look at, we've got Dermot's comment in here, which I'd agree with. Rahm has the ability to win a tournament by 8+ shots, etc. Kind of a DJ-esque. When they're hot, they're hot. So I would agree. I would massively agree with that. When you say, "Oh, these guys have just had their 2-year periods," it all depends how high your ceiling is. For someone like Tommy Fleetwood, he kind of came from relatively, I suppose, unknown at the time. He hadn't really competed, and he had this couple-of-year period where second at Portrush, he was unbelievable at the Ryder Cup. He's been there and thereabouts at major championships, won a lot on the European Tour, race to Dubai. The one thing I would say about Morikawa is people knew about this guy, and that's the thing with golf at the moment. It just seems like the college golfers that are coming off tour, they're ready-made PGA Tour players, and it's not like they've to find their way in the old Web.com Tour or the Corn Ferry Tour as it's known, or they have to make their way through the Challenge Tour like Brooks Koepka did. These guys are coming out of college and they're going straight into the PGA Tour and winning. And people like Matt Wolff and Collin Morikawa, guys like this. Whereas before you would have had people like, you might have remembered them, Dan, Ryu Ishikawa, guys like this who are prodigies that had to make that big step up. But what you're finding now is college golf and people on the Challenge Tour and the Corn Ferry Tour, they're just ready to jump back into the top echelons of professional golf. And that's the thing. I mean, Shane Lowry's very, very vocal about it, but only 400 or 500 people make money professionally by playing golf, and I think it's even less earn a very good living around the world. So these guys are coming out of college and they're going straight into earning mega bucks, and like Collin Morikawa winning 2 majors in his first 8 major starts. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I think Morikawa was meant to still be in college or very close to this, where he left a bit early, joined the PGA Tour, started making loads of cuts, and won 2 majors in 8 starts. And before we get on to Seamus Power, I do want to touch on a couple of players. And Dermot, again, comment here, we're forgetting about Justin Thomas too. Man is a major and a players champ, and loads of PGA Tour wins considering his age. Sean, I don't know about you, I'm getting sort of Rory McIlroy light vibes off JT in his terms of his major performances, because, you know, going into the Masters, I was like, this guy is a proper big time player, will go and win a hatful of majors. But right now, I don't know if he has the temperament to contend in enough majors to win. Because look at Rory. The frustrating thing about Rory is that he's not contending in majors. Like, he's contended in a handful of majors in 28 since he's won. You know what I mean? And the last few, I don't even want to go through the results. I probably will when you start talking, just to read them out. But like, this week was very poor, I thought, from Rory. It just seems that any time he got going, he made a bogey. And I don't know. I think he needs to, and this is maybe too obvious a decision. And I know his win at Quail Hollow, his caddy helped him a lot. But I definitely think he should go and try and get a new caddy, or at least try it out, because he needs to change something in there. Because he's changed the swing coach, he's changed a lot of things, he's changed perspective, he's tried to downplay majors, he's tried to just talk about 4 majors. Nothing's working at the moment. And maybe I'm just wishful thinking, but like, Rory on his day is like, he had the biggest cheers on the Thursday and Friday for every single putt he made, even up until the Sunday. He's still got a massive following in golf, probably the biggest following in golf still outside of Tiger Woods. And it's just not happening for him in majors. Like, he'll probably win a couple of events between now and the end of the year, but I say come Masters time, I just can't see him winning another major until he changes something.
Well, on to JT first. I think JT is just gone through a really tough time in his life, and it's well known with his granddad. There was that incident at the in Hawaii at the start of the year. Then he won the Players and felt like kind of a classic JT win. He just came from nowhere, had a bad first couple of days, and he was a big price in play, and he came through it, and he just obliterated the field really in those Saturday and Sunday at Sawgrass. And when you win around there, I mean, they kind of say it about a lot of courses, but if you win the Players, you have to be a really good golfer. Then I think a big one for JT this year was Augusta, and I think he how well he was playing, I think he should have won that. Now obviously Matsuyama had did it, but Thomas, how well he was playing up until then, tee to green, really should have given himself a chance to win come Sunday. And what happened to him is that he hit in the water on 13 and completely ruined his chances on Sunday to even post the score. Now it would have been complete minuscule to what Matsuyama did. So that's just something for JT. With Rory, I mean, you could tell him to do anything at the moment. I think Rory's big thing is, I think what Rory's struggling with is how big a name he is at the moment and how poorly he's played now relative to what Rory should be doing. So, for example, I know a lot of people weren't happy with the coverage for the Irish Open, but it was basically the Rory show. Now, naturally, he's the highest ranked player in the field. He's one of the best golfers in the world. First time, yeah, exactly, right. But I definitely do think he has that almost a burden. So it's difficult for him at the moment. And when you're such a prodigy growing up, that I wouldn't say he's almost that Wayne Rooney at the minute, where you're almost burnt out for a few years. And I necessarily don't think a bad thing for Rory is to take an extended break, and see his kid grow up and have all that and settle in somewhere, and maybe just very few events, play the 4 majors, your WGCs, just make sure you're doing enough to qualify for the big events, which obviously he can. So it's just something that he needs to sit down with. And I think this summer will have been kind of the end of a 1.5 year chapter since COVID. He would have had the Olympics, which there's been a huge hoo-ha about, and he's actually spoke during the week about how he's not looking forward to it.
His comments, like I completely accept what he's saying, and I completely respect the fact he doesn't feel patriotism, but he wasn't specifically asked about patriotism. He was asked about Olympics, and I guess it's Rory's almost like too much of an open book, and he just needed to say, I'm looking forward to playing or whatever, just the PR line. But I guess that's probably what makes him. But yeah, like the fact he's not looking forward to the Olympics, like, I don't know, I don't think people were overly impressed, and I think maybe Ireland, looking back at it, maybe should be sending Seamus Power there with Shane Lowry. But that's not just on Rory, Sean, before you come back in, like 5 top 10s in this last 12 major starts, and honestly, I guarantee you those top 10s, there's a tight 5th in there is the best. Most of them are back top 10s, And on, like, he had that extended break with the pandemic, and I know everyone had that break, but he hasn't come back the same player. I think him trying to chase, like with Roy, it's a lot of small things. He was trying to chase distance from Bryson. He was trying to change what was a really good golf swing, and he's changed his swing coach. Like, I do think the caddy is an easy fix or something, and visibly people will see, okay, Rory's trying to give this a go. But I don't know. I can't see him doing it, to be honest. He's his own man, and that's what makes him. And look, he has a perspective where there's more important things than golf, and that's completely true. And I genuinely, but I know Rory wants to win more majors. Just with the few quotes that you see and the way he talks, he wants to win more majors. He wants to be remembered as a golfer that wins 7, 8, 9 majors. If you win 7, 8, 9 majors, you're in the top. Very few golfers, and just on 4 at the moment, he seems like he's still underachieving in his career for the talent he has. And even though the competition's got a lot better, I still think he is, on his day, he's as good as anyone out there, Morikawa included. But I don't know, right now, like, James has come, like, shout out to Seamus Power being the 2nd best Irish golfer in the world behind Shane Lowry. It was brilliant seeing Seamus Power win. We'll get to that in just a sec. But for Rory, it's last thing, Sean, if you want to come in on any more things about Rory, we still talk about him after majors because his performance, he deserves to be up there, contend. He doesn't even contend anymore. And that's the frustrating thing.
Yeah, we'll jump on to Seamus Power, and for those people who've been following him, he's had a really, really good few weeks, and up until this week, it felt like he'd actually achieved. And the fact that what worried me is, and he's spoken a lot about it, he hadn't actually secured his playing rights for next season. Where how well he was playing was a little bit disappointing, and he had a couple of Sundays where he took up bogeys and just dropped a couple of shots, and a couple of shots is a couple of places on the FedEx Cup, and a couple of places is your card for next season. So I think it was brilliant to see Seamus Power win in the style he did as well. But also I think it's massive for him because a lot of people can sometimes say, oh, it's the event during the Open, no one really cares about it, no one's watching it. But I think with the eyes of the golfing world on golf at the minute, everyone at home in Ireland would have watched the Open, had a couple of hours, and then what would have turned on Sky and seen Seamus Power win. I do think like it's a massive win for Seamus, and with how well he's playing. I mean, this has been coming. He's been knocking on the door. He was one of the favourites going into this, and it seems like a massive moment in his career. And what we've said about other players in the past, where he's secured his rights for next season. He's going to play in a major next year. He's closing in on the top 100 in the world, and we all know what that gets in terms of other events. So everything's really good for Seamus Power, but it just feels like the timing with how well he's played felt overdue, and the manner, the 6-hole playoff. Now, in fairness, JT Poston won't look back at that event with happy memories, but for Seamus, I mean, it's a fabulous win and a fabulous achievement. And I think we have to pinch ourselves in this country. You look at England; they've had two major champions since 1996, since Nick Faldo, Danny Willett, and Justin Rose. They've had a lot of world number ones. They've had a lot of brilliant Ryder Cup players, and in that time, Ireland has won, I think it's 10 major championships. If you include 4, Rory, 3 of Harrington, Clark, McDowell. So there's a lot to be said for Irish golf, and it's brilliant to see another winner on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, well, like you said, Sean, like Seamus Power was going in when he's like the Barbasol, which I'll have corrected to Barbados on my Twitter, one of my tweets, which was a bit of a disaster. His last 6 events, he was tied 9, tied 19, tied 19, tied 8, and then won it. But he was going into it as favourite, and a lot of he'd always seemed to fade away on those Sundays, and he just seemed like he was coming up just short. I was kind of half keeping an eye on it. But then when he got into the playoff, I was watching the playoff, and to chip in on the first playoff hole, now Poston then followed up with his birdie putt. But Jesus, every single hole, and in fairness to JT, he also hit a few clutch shots. But for me, Seamus, he hit some incredible clutch shots. Like his driving, he's driving off the tee on the 18, especially the last 2 holes he played were incredible. He just played solid golf, and he forced a mistake when JT Poston hit it in the water, and that was enough to secure victory, and he rolled it up for a 2-putt for par. But what he gets from this is incredible. 300 FedEx Cup points puts him inside the top 70. He's just outside the top 100, like you said, in the Golf World rankings. Those 4 playoff events, well, hopefully he can play at least 2 of them. You know, like top 100 qualifier, top. I don't know how much they've changed the format a bit. It's hard in major season to focus on the FedEx Cup, but it's absolutely massive for him. And well, it'll come too late to make a Ryder Cup or anything. That's not a priority for Seamus right now, considering he's not even a member of the European Tour. But for him to, like you said, the Irish golf is just absolutely incredible. I think he became the 7th Irish player to win a PGA Tour event. Would I be right to that? Or the numbers right? Or maybe the 6th? Or maybe the 7th? But it's just, you know, if you name them,
question.
Yeah, G-Mac, Clark, Harrington, McIlroy, McDowell, Larry, that's it. Yeah, so it is 7. Yeah, so Power, it's incredible. And what for Matt, and he's taken the US route. He's living over there now, and it's amazing seeing a completely different story to the other 6 golfers. They all have their own individual stories of how they came through, mainly through the GUI, where Seamus has kind of gone about it for his living situation or whatever, and it's incredible. The way he just seemed that he hit those clutch shots at the right time, and he seemed to be getting a lot of love from the American, social media following that were because it's the diehard golf fans watching the Barbasols, particularly over stateside. So it just seemed, it was a great win, and people were keeping an eye on him because he was creeping up on leaderboards in big events, and sometimes you have to make your breakthrough in an event where everyone's playing the Open. But JT Poston's already won on tour. He's actually quite a good player in his own right. And to beat him in 6 playoff holes is incredible. And what it's going to do for him, the 2-year exemption is massive, 2+ season exemption. So that means to the end of, what are we now? So the end of 2023, he'll be guaranteed his playing rights in the PGA Tour, which is absolutely massive. And he can really build on that And sometimes when you get that first win, Sean, similar to John Ram and majors, just the top finishes, I'd expect him to be up on a big event at some point in the next few months, hopefully, just so like a top 5 in a big event with that Irish flag there, or maybe contend. And while I don't see him winning one of them for a while, I think he can kick on from this. And it's like he only has to look at the likes of Shane Larry. I know Paul McGinley talks about spending a lot of time with him in the Olympics in 2016 in Rio de Janeiro. That's 5 years ago, and he's finally got his first win. So fair play to him. A comment here just from Dermot saying, do you think Seamus should start playing in Europe? I really think he could compete there too. I personally think he'll stick anyway. Do I think he should play in Europe? I probably not, because he's got his experience in the PGA Tour now. He knows the golf courses a lot more. It feels like he knows he has a game to compete. Like, he's not like a massive driving distance or anything like that, but he's well able to compete over there, and he's used to the courses. Sean, I don't know what you make of that.
Yeah, no, I don't see him. I don't see him moving or uprooting himself. I think he seems very confident with what he is, but it is quite weird at the moment that he's 34 years of age. There just seems to be a few guys around that age that are really, really top golfers. Jason Kokrak being one, late bloomer, people like Harris English, guys like that. So this seems like a pretty interesting time in golf. Definitely one to keep an eye on. Seamus Power, please God, we've someone here who's gone to compete, and next year's PGA, it'll be his first major. We're going to have 3 players from the Republic of Ireland there at least. So there's a lot to be happy for with Irish golf, considering where it was a couple of years ago.
Just last thing then on Shane Larry, and I thought it was a great defense from him at the Open. One thing we didn't get on when we talked about the Open, he seemed to struggle the first 9 holes on Thursday, but I watched a lot of Shane Larry throughout the 4 days, and I was really, really impressed. I know his interviews, he said, particularly on Saturday, I think -1 or whatever he shot was the highest he could have shot, really. He left a few shots out there. So I definitely, off the back of this week, can see Shane winning another one of the Clark Jugs, which is, or even another one of the majors. I genuinely, to this week, I thought was probably his most impressive week since winning the Open. And like you said, it gets him in the Ryder Cup points. It's brilliant. He's going to be playing in the Olympics next week. It's an individual stroke play people need to remember. So it's not like him and Rory are a team or anything like that. So I actually expect one of them to get a medal. Like, maybe Rory turns it on or Shane turns it on. I think I can't remember the publication, Sean, but Gavin Cooney tweeted it out, and they reckon we'll get 5 medals, and one of them is gold from Rory McIlroy in golf. And I was like, well, they've got that completely wrong, but I think we might get sneak one with Shane, but who knows? But I haven't seen the golf course or anything like that, or what game would suit, but I'm pretty excited to watch them in the Olympics. And then, like you said, Ryder Cup, Padraig Harrington, where does he play Shane? Not a lot of stuff we can talk about, but I do think golf is in a great place, and even more importantly for the viewers listening here, Irish golf is even in a arguably better place, which is incredible. I never had a chance to respond to that English stat. It's absolutely amazing stat that they've only won 2 majors since '96.
Yeah, I think they've had more world number ones than they've had major championships in that time.
Luke Donald, Paul Casey, Lee Westwood, Lesser Send, Ian Poulter now win majors. Justin Rose arguably underachieving with 1, but just shows you they're not easy. And maybe going back to what we talked about at the start of the golf talk, Collin Morikawa, John Ram, you're not guaranteed majors. They don't get handed to you. You have to go and earn them. And even last thing on John Ram, how well he played this week, it was that first round that cost him a right shot at winning it, and if you've one bad round, you shoot 2 over and everyone's shooting 7 under or 6 under, you're not going to win it. So but yeah, like you said, golf is in a great place, and we always kind of, I think, like similar to players that fake their swing a bit, I think sometimes we'd always say golf's in a great place and faked it a bit, where we big names, but they weren't competing in the top end of majors. I do think, to wrap it up, that golf, the big names are showing up in every major, especially with Jordan Spieth now and like Louis and stuff. It's amazing. But yeah, massive win, Seamus Power. Looking forward to the rest of the golf season now.
Exactly. And we've a few busy weeks, and I'm certain we'll keep an eye on the Olympics coming up. Obviously, the Ryder Cup, the end to the FedEx Cup season, and I think it's brilliant that we've an extra eye to keep on in the evening with Seamus Power. Dan, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
No worries.
Remember, if you're listening on podcast form, or if you watched us live, please leave a like and a comment. We've really appreciate all the comments in tonight. We've enjoyed them. Next up, we're gonna hear during the week about different things. We're going to keep you updated on fan stories with our first episode with Tim Stokes last week. So thanks everyone for listening to the podcast, and we'll see you next week. Take it easy.